One range. Pre-order now at Carphone Warehouse. Offer subject to availability and 24-month contract.
You ain't shit! I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass.
Well, fans can be the harshest critics, you know.
And they often are.
A wife is often the harshest critic of her husband.
I thought I was invincible. That's what you're trained to believe as a sports person.
There was 4 million people in Ireland who knew much more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof with the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jim McGuinness in his life.
Welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us on 53106. We're streaming the panel as well now. You can watch us on the Off the Ball social channels for Periscope and Twitter at Off the Ball, on YouTube and on Facebook. We're also streaming on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in your app store now to download it. This is the Saturday panel. Rugby has had a lot of challenges at the moment. Financial, scheduling issues during the pandemic, the bombshell of the consequences of concussion and what it's done in the game. Still, the sport very popular. You just need to look at the Six Nations viewing figures to know that. Now, rugby has changed enormously over the last quarter of a century. For so long, it was an amateur game. Now it's professional. The way the game is played has changed. So to look back on the then and analyse some issues around the now, over the next hour, we're joined by 3 former Irish internationals, ex-Munster and Shannon second row Mick Galwey, the former Leinster and Lions prop Nick Popplewell, and a winger who played for London Irish and was key in increasing the player's voice in the game with Irupa, Niall Woods, the current MD of Navy Blue Sports. Mick, Nick and Niall, how are we all getting on?
How are we doing, John? How are you, Mary?
I'm good as gold. Anyway, I don't see Niall. Looks a bit vacant on the screen.
He was always vacant, even as a player. We didn't see
I'm
much.
going to say, yeah, exactly. Never showed up.
Yeah, it only took 15 seconds for the slagging lads. So rugby was declared open by the International Rugby Board on the 26th of August 1995, ringing in the professional era just over 2 months after South Africa won the World Cup. Nick and Mickey were down in South Africa. To people who don't remember, it was a completely different world back then. Just to go back to the day job and actually being an amateur, Nick Popplewell, what were you doing day to day and how often in the week were you training?
Ooh. It's funny because I'm a young fella now playing at the moment, and I would obviously, just a couple of ground rules before we start. No cursing, correct?
That's right, yeah, and no libel. Don't libel anybody.
Don't libel anyone.
Can't promise that, no, can't promise that.
Mick, just tell us, what date were you married again? Just want to...
34, geez, Poppy, that's a tricky one now, but at least I know that one. 31st of July, 1993.
Okay, very good, yeah, very good.
Yeah,
anyway,
I'm still married, by the way.
John, sorry. Oh, the other thing is, I can't promote the fact I'm an auctioneer in Wexford and I'm looking for houses in Helens Bay. Isn't that correct?
You can't do that, no.
Absolutely.
I won't do that then.
Even though you just
right,
have.
But back to, I suppose, our weekly routine would have been probably busy enough if it was in the Interpros, which was basically, you know, playing Munster, Ulster and Connacht, and that was it. The Exiles at the end, we would have been probably training Monday and Wednesday with Leinster and Tuesday and Thursday in the club. We would have always had a match on a Saturday. If there was an Irish match coming up, we would, after that Saturday match, we would probably rush down probably 8 or 9 pints and then be ready for a meeting on the Saturday evening and do a fairly hefty scrummaging session, I think, in the Sunday Golf, as far as I remember.
First thing Sunday morning always was a scrummaging session, I think for some reason.
The difference was we always had a good match on a Saturday. And I think certainly with COVID at the moment, it's been, I think, so frustrating for players, because I think we're looking at matches on the telly and we're saying, you know, God, they're looking a little bit ring rusty or not as sharp as we're used to. And I think that's because obviously there's been very, very few matches, you know, very, very few competitive matches.
Yeah, and Mick, like, you played 113 times for Shannon. You dominated the AIL. You know, I mean, you like legends like Axel Foley, the late great Axel and Quinny and everything. What was it like back then in the amateur era playing for a club like Shannon?
Yeah, like it was amazing. I suppose you know, the AIL was very good for Irish rugby. There's no doubt about it. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not just saying because like we were successful, because we weren't successful in the first 4 years. The likes of Gary Owen, Cork Con, and young Munsters were winning it, and we kind of felt we just kind of felt that we were as good as them, and yet we couldn't win the AIL. And then, luckily enough, we won 4 times in a row. But the bottom line is we had some exceptional players. And I remember one of the days going out, and like our pack, for example, was John Hayes, Mark McDermott, who played Ireland A, John Hayes, Marcus Horn, myself and Brian Rigney, and Harvey Quillen and Foley and Mick Fitzgibbon in the back row. So like that was an exceptional pack for a club side. And because like we knew we had a good side. And I suppose at the time, you know, in the mid-90s, we were kind of, some of us were professional, more of the lads weren't. And it was, I suppose the IL was massive back then. For example, I remember like we played Gary Owen and I think in 98, and I think there was about 25,000 people at the IL final. You know what I mean? And this is 2 Limerick teams. And then obviously the whole thing switched over to the provinces, which they call clubs now, which I'll never get used to, by the way. But you know, it was fantastic. It was. We knew we were on a road to something very successful, and yet at the same time, we didn't know where it was going. I can remember at the time there was talks of that clubs should represent the Ireland, for example, but it was never going to be a runner. And thankfully, and I suppose this is one of the great things about the IRFU, like they have the 4 teams, and you know the four provinces of Ireland has been there forever, and it was an easy fix. But certainly, club rugby had a big impact, I suppose, in the early days, particularly on the professional game, and then unfortunately, and I still feel bad about the club game. It's kind of gone off the charts now. You know what I mean?
Well, I think Olive, I think more than ever, I certainly, you know, looking at and probably studying Leinster more in depth now. I think there's very, very few issues or negative issues you'd have. If you had one, you'd be saying lads need more matches. And I mean, you're seeing lads literally maybe getting a match every 3 weeks and playing for 20 minutes. And I know, granted, a few positions you can get away with that, but certainly in the front row, you know, you're learning your trade the hard way, and there's only one way. I mean, a scrummaging machine is fantastic, but it doesn't kick or bite and curse at you or whatever. But really, you know, there is no substitute for live games, even if it is, you know, playing for Wexford Wanderers or Gorey or, you know, your Greystones, your Lansdownes, you know, it's
absolutely.
Yeah,
you can't be. I remember I was at Paul Wallace one time. He said he had to go down to Castle Island to play a Munster Junior Cup match. You know what I mean? But I know the fella he was marking. He was a farmer from down below, and he said it was one of the hardest lessons he ever got. And you'll know, Poppy, particularly in the front row, you need to earn your stripes. You need to be turned inside out before you're ever going to be a prop, and that's only at club level.
And Niall, we want to bring you in here as well. I was reading Brendan Fanning's book, From There to Here, about the amateur to professional, the transition. And you went down to Australia for a tour in 1992, and it read like a complete shambles. And then you also left Ireland to play in London at London Irish and Harlequins. What was your journey like?
As the boys said, the AIL really was the start of it, sort of in the early 90s. And then that actual tour was 94. To Australia, Galwey was on it. I think, Poppy, you were injured, so... I don't remember any stories about Galwey on that tour. So,
I have a few here, so you could save them.
Do I?
I won't if you won't.
I think
Poppy, go ahead now if you want.
I think that.
Sorry, Niall. Apologies, brother. Listen, good to see you. I know you're late, but listen, thanks for showing up.
I'll always be 7 years younger than you, though. So that tour for me, John, was a turning point. I was probably about 78, 80 kilos, and the Aussies who had won the World Cup in 91 were just massive, even the backs. So that was really, as I said, a turning point. Then you had a mixture between AIL, playing with Leinster. It went from playing sort of 3 games in December a year against Leinster, or Ulster, Munster and Connacht, then the Exiles into, I think, the 95-6 season. We had 11 or 12 games. So it was almost pro then, even though the game had gone pro in August 95. And then I went to London. So I love London. Probably played my best rugby as a pro, but I definitely enjoyed the times, the amateur days. It was so much fun, so many stories. Obviously I see Gallup the odd time. I haven't seen Poppy for a while, but they're straight into taking the absolute mickey out of me, which is nothing new. So, and it's the same when you see guys from that vintage.
I certainly remember one story. You're talking about the Australian World Cup. I remember because they won the World Cup, they picked a match. I think Barbarians decided they'd play against them. And as was customary then, you went out for a few bevies the night before with the Australians, as in the Barbas did. And I think we got back at around 3 o'clock in the morning, as we normally did. And also in a Barbarians match, it's always a running game, and people say how fantastic and how fit everyone is. Absolute rubbish. Normally there was an agreement between the two packs that basically, lads, you lean in the scrum, our line-out ball, we win it, your line-out ball, you can have it. I was, I think our front row was myself and Probe, and I'm not sure who was stuck in the middle. Irrelevant anyway. But the agreement was no pushing in the scrums. Anyway, first scrum, 5 yard on the Australian line. And Proben just looked over at me and he said, "Bets off, Pops." And we pushed them over, got a 5 yard try or push over, whatever. And I think it was probably one of the roughest, most physical Barbarians matches up front that was ever played. It was just no holds barred after that. Anyway, sorry about that interjection.
No, but it is all about the stories, isn't it? Like Mick, I was watching The Field over Christmas and Richard Harris and admiring his performance, and you're getting phone calls from Richard Harris after you're winning games at Munster. That must have been a bit of a surreal experience.
It was amazing. I remember, and the story is, and I'll tell you another story about The Field. I remember coming off in 2000. I was captain of Munster, and we beat Toulouse down in Bordeaux, and I'm coming off the pitch, and it was Nigel Sammer-Smith. You know what I mean? That, in fairness to him, he said Richard is on the phone, and I'm thinking, who is Richard? You know what I mean? And I said, Richard? Yeah, he said, he's in Mexico. And then I'm totally bamboozled. I said, who the hell is Richard in Mexico? But it happened to be Richard Harris. And I suppose in Limerick, they call him Dickie Harris. But I got on the phone to him, and I swear to God, he's crying down the phone. He's literally crying down the phone, congratulating me and telling me how great it is. And he asked me, can I come to the final? And I said, of course you can. But I didn't really think it out, because Richard Harris was a Young Munsters fan, right? And every game he ever went to for Young Munsters, he lost, right? And the Young Munsters lost. And so they called him the Jonah. They were calling Richard Harris the Jonah. But moving on to the Heineken Cup final in Twickenham against Northampton, of course, we lost. And who walks into the dressing room? Only Richard Harris. I hadn't even thought about it anymore. And of course, Klaus saw him, And you can only imagine what Klaus said. He said, "What the beep are you doing here, you Jonah?" You know what I mean? Yeah, that was those days were fantastic. But getting back to Richard Harris again, The Field, I remember we played remember, Poppy, back in the days where you go to the cinema the night before a match, right? Oh,
good.
It was an Ireland A match below in Thomond Park, and God, it had to be 90, I think. We were playing Argentina. Was that 90? Maybe around 89.
Near enough.
Maybe 90. Yeah. Anyway. But
I got dropped after that anyway.
What's that?
I got dropped again after that.
The real prop came in after that. But I remember Gordon Hamilton being playing for Ireland A. And Gordon, of course, with the Nordy and the whole lot. But he didn't really understand maybe the Irish country, the Republican psyche. He came out of the field he was trembling, he said he didn't know what the hell is going on here. He thought he'd gone through all of the troubles in the north, but this was a completely different animal altogether. I remember we went to watch the film the night before, and I swear to God, we were pumped the following day. Just a shame we weren't playing maybe someone like England or something. When we were playing Argentina. Harris, and God be with the days, and I don't think it happens anymore, when celebrities came into the dressing room, and Richard Harris is one of those, and I don't think that happens anymore, particularly maybe in the modern game.
Yeah, Niall, you ended up playing at the old Wembley. It's a strange thing to look back in your career and go that you played at a ground that doesn't exist anymore.
It was incredible because we obviously grew up watching the FA Cup final. I think it was the first or second Saturday in May, and it was the whole build-up on BBC, the full day, the road to Wembley. So I hadn't been picked for about 3 years. I used to get dropped quite a lot. And playing in England, and there was the split between picking home-based players and overseas players. So I remember walking up the tunnel, which I would have seen as a kid for years and years and years, out onto the pitch. It was just incredible to walk out and play there. And then the pitch, of course, was absolutely spectacular. So we actually played Wales there because the Millennium Stadium was being built for the World Cup in '99. So, and we beat them, which is probably a good thing because they followed up 2 weeks later and they beat England and denied them a Grand Slam. I think the third or fourth time in a row they had bottled it. But it was a brilliant experience.
You were fantastic, Golf, too. I remember seeing that.
I was man of the match.
You were man of the match, yeah. Unbelievable.
But Niall, do you remember after we were in the original old dressing rooms, and do you remember the big bats inside it with the big what is it, the 3 lines or whatever it was?
Union Jacks.
What's that? Union Jacks. Oh Jesus, yeah, the whole shooting match. But like, and as you said, I'm just backing up what you said. Like, I was lucky enough maybe to play. I've played in a lot of great stadiums, but to have played in Wembley was certainly up there. You know what I mean? It's just a once-off, but to have ran out there was fantastic.
My vivid memories of Wales are, in fairness, we didn't win very many matches on reflection, but we never lost in Cardiff Arms Park.
Never. God, never.
But we never beat them in Lansdowne Road. So that's, I think, 6-6-all.
Yeah, something like that. Like, it was amazing, Poppy. Do you remember, like, even when we were getting the wooden spoon every year, we still managed to beat Wales. Like, you know what I mean?
And I can remember one, just to say how things have changed, I think we're going to address on that later on. I remember prior to, so we would have been playing on a Saturday, so Friday anyway, we were all tucked up in bed, probably around, I suppose, yourself and myself, and Claude probably went just out for a nightcap, just a couple to help us sleep. But the fire alarm went off in the hotel at 3 o'clock. Remember that? So we were all in the car park. Again, I better not say any more bleeps. All in the car park. And as it transpired, the selectors were in a private bar and they were smoking so many cigars that the alarm went off. And we were there, whatever it was, 10 hours before an international. They were there, and Sid Miller came up to me and said, "Oh, geez, you're playing against so-and-so tomorrow. Get down there and I'll show you how to scrummage against them." And then you're kind of saying,
I can remember as well. I think it was my first away game in the Five Nations in Edinburgh, and the amount of Alacadoos. I'd heard about Alacadoos and hadn't seen too many of them. We get off the plane in Edinburgh, and there's 4 coaches to go to the team hotel on the Thursday afternoon. 3 coaches are for Alacadoos and 1 for us. And then when we get to the hotel.
Yes, and
the first 3 coaches were the Alacadoos.
Yeah, the last coach to leave was ours, in fairness.
Yeah. And when you try to check in, you were pushed out of the way by the Alacadoos because they were all there for their freebie for the 3 nights with their wives, everything.
You couldn't make it up, but it's true, like, you know what I mean? It was true.
Now, in fairness, I saw somebody somewhere on the line, that's all being changed now, that I won't call them a junket, but the junkets have now stopped. So if you want to travel, make your own way there or whatever.
Well, we're getting a bit of a flavour of the amateur in rugby, and that has obviously changed professional and changed usually over the last 25 years. Nick Popplewell, Mick Galwey and Niall Woods, stay with us after 2 o'clock. We're going to talk about the Lions tour this year, issues around concussion and issues around the professional game now. 53106 for your text message. You've got a question for the lads. We're back after this with the panel.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
Now's the time to make a plan to keep well over the months ahead. Being creative can really help you to relax. Try to keep up a hobby, or start a new one, or even just switch off. Make your plan today to keep well. Find more ideas at gov.ie/Healthy Ireland.
Make it a really good afternoon and check out the great car insurance discounts at insuremycars.ie. Ireland's trusted car insurance specialists. For super family savings, check out insuremycars.ie. City Financial Marketing Group Limited, trading as insuremycars.ie, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
At Tesco, we know how important saving is to you. That's why we've created Value with You in mind. We've brought together everyday favourites, and to make shopping great value even easier, we've put a red bubble beside each and every one. We've put red bubbles beside daily essentials, special somethings, and lots of other stuff too. To make sure you're getting great value, shop the red bubbles in store. We put them there with you in mind. Tesco. Every little helps.
Show Me the Science with Professor Luke O'Neill.
A News Talk original podcast series focusing on different issues, from the serious to the silly, all explained through science.
If you listen to music you like, my favourite part of the body, the immune system, likes it as well. If the man was very symmetrical, the woman rated that smell much more highly. Now, why would that be?
Catch up on the podcast series at newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app.
This Sunday morning on Alive and Kicking. Author Caroline Foran, on her latest book, Naked, she talks to me about why we should focus on being content rather than happy, and how no one really has it all figured out. Lecturer in education and psychology, Dr. Mary O'Kane, will join me to talk about navigating your way through your kids' screen time. And Siobhan McKenna on her Ayurvedic training under Deepak Chopra.
Alive and Kicking.
With me, Claire McKenna, this Sunday morning at 9.
Thanks to Benelin. Always read the label. Ask your pharmacist for advice.
On News Talk.
The moment you see the new Volkswagen Tiguan, you just know. It's equipped the way you want it equipped. It's connected the way you want it connected. And it's powered the way you want it powered. Plus, with PCP finance from just 0% APR, everything else falls into place. Follow your instinct. Search Volkswagen Tiguan now. Finance provided by way of hire purchase agreement from Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland and subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply. Visit volkswagen.ie/211 for further information. Volkswagen.
DoneDeal has the largest range of premium cars in Ireland with Ireland's trusted car dealerships. That's why you'll find Leinster's Spirit Motor Group on DoneDeal. Stop by Spirit's online showroom on DoneDeal today and connect with Spirit, who will deal and deliver safely to you. DoneDeal. For deals to feel great about from all of Ireland's trusted car dealerships.
Last year, there were so many things we missed hearing. Look forward to the sounds of a new year. With 15% off our best-selling and latest rechargeable and Bluetooth-enabled hearing aids at Boots. Book a free appointment at bootshearingcare.ie today and turn up the things you love for less. Phonak Paradise Hearing Aids only. Offer ends 12th February 2021. Over 18s and hearing care stores only.
At Carphone Warehouse, we've got the best deals in town. Like these exclusive offers. Get the iPhone 11 for €49 when you switch to 3's €45 a month plan, save €180. Or get the Samsung S20 FE for €49 when you switch to an Air plan from $29.99 a month, save €100. Or upgrade your phone to the powerful new Samsung Galaxy S21 range. Pre-order now at Carphone Warehouse. Offer subject to availability and 24-month contract.
Our intercity trains are operating at 25% capacity, reserved for essential workers and those who are travelling for an essential service. That means everyone must pre-book their intercity ticket at irishrail.ie.
Thank you for helping us all stay safe. From Erin Road, Erin, part of the Transport for Ireland network.
Across Ireland. This is the IMRO Radio Awards National Station of the Year. This is News Talk.
It's 2 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Adrian Harman. Advocacy groups for children with special needs say they're deeply concerned at the lack of clarity about the reopening of schools next week. The Department of Education wrote to schools principals last night, setting out an agreed plan for the resumption of in-class learning this Thursday. However, Forsa, which represents 12,000 staff, including SNAs, says there's no agreement and further talks won't be held on the issue until Tuesday. CEO of Inclusion Ireland, Enda Egan, says the situation is very frustrating.
Unfortunately, I think
the union is of the view that it will talk to its members on Tuesday, but that's only 2 days before next Thursday. So we would urge the partners in education to meet over the weekend and please sort out any issues that are outstanding.
1,800 GPs and practice nurses are being vaccinated against COVID-19 at 3 mass vaccination clinics today. 800 healthcare workers are receiving Moderna's dose in Dublin's Phoenix Park, while 500 are being inoculated in Galway and Portlaoise. Dublin GP Sinead Cronin is among those getting vaccinated. She says there's a huge sense of relief among doctors.
GPs on the front line have just gone above and beyond at all stages of the pandemic, so it's great to see people, the euphoria today, coming out, getting their vaccines.
A debate to ensure student nurses and midwives receive fair pay will be held in the Dáil this week. It's after a proposal earlier this month which would see student nurses and midwives paid €100 per week. Sinn Féin health spokesperson David Cullinan says it's important nurses and midwives are paid fairly for their work.
It is within the grasp of the Minister for Health to revert to the agreement that was in place in March, pay student nurses and midwives, and that's exactly what the motion, which will be debated in the Dáil next Wednesday, will call on the Minister for Health to do.
And Stena Line has announced a new sailing route from Dublin to Cherbourg in France. The once-a-weekly route, which will begin next Saturday, aims to give hauliers an additional option to bypass Britain following Brexit. The ferry company says there's been a change to the flow of freight on Irish Sea, with its services to Holyhead down around 60% in the first 2 weeks of this year. It's 2 minutes past 2.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA. Download the new AA app to request a roadside rescue and track the patrol right to your car.
Breezy with sunny spells and some passing showers. Maximum temperatures of 7 to 9 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
This is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. You can text us on 53106 or tweet us at Off the Ball. We're back with the Saturday panel. We're talking about rugby's amateur era and the transition to professionalism with the former Munster and Shannon second row Mick Galwey, the ex-Leinster and Lions prop Nick Popplewell, and a winger who played for London Irish and was key in increasing the player's voice in the game with Arupa, Niall Woods. It's now at the moment Wolves 2, West Brom 3 in the Premier League. We're streaming this conversation as well as listening on News Talk. You can watch us on the Off the Ball social channels for Periscope and Twitter at Off the Ball, on YouTube, on Facebook, and we're also streaming on the new OTB Sports app. Guys, listen, for the first half of the panel, there's so many war stories and so much enjoyment that you obviously had in the amateur era and when you played, guys, that I feel like I could walk out of here now for 3 hours, come back, and you'd still be exchanging great stories because you probably haven't seen each other maybe during COVID and everything for so long. Nick, like when you played in the Lions Tour in New Zealand, you were one of the only Irishmen to beat New Zealand for a long time. How does that compare to then when you ended up at Newcastle winning the Premiership? Did you see the change between the amateur and the pro game coming in?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, the Lions trip to me, obviously, myself and Golov, I think were the only lads that were picked to go out originally.
Originally, do you remember Vinnie Cunningham and Richard Wallace came out later?
Yeah, that didn't really count though, did it?
No,
they
probably
say it did.
That was it.
Okay. Now just let's promote ourselves today, Golov. So I think, and the only reason we probably went out was because we actually, for some unknown reason, we beat England, I think the night before they picked the squad. So I think apparently there was no Irish lads going to go out, and then said, "Shag it, sure, listen, we may give them a dust of Irish."
We better bring a few paddies just in case.
Bring a few paddies. We're talking about paddies. I remember, and it shows you amateur Vieira. This was still amateur. I brought out 12 bottles of poutine. And the reason I brought out 12 bottles of poutine was Golov and myself were out touring New Zealand the year before. Remember that? And we actually nearly beat New Zealand the first test, and then it went horribly wrong after that. Yeah. But the price of drink over there was ferocious, wasn't it? And we were kind of living on, I think, 20 punts a day, which wasn't an awful lot. So I had this idea anyway. A good old boss of mine, John Rochford, who sadly has passed away, said, "Listen, we talked about it, bring over some poutine, because every town has an Irish bar. And in fairness, even if they don't have an Irish bar, somebody puts up their hand and says, yeah, of course we have an Irish bar." So every stop we had, as soon as we arrived, I went down to probably the best bar, and just kind of, or if there was a Mighty Mix or the Shamrock or something in there, and the landlord would be there, give them the bottle of poutine, and you'd reminisce a little bit and say, we'll see you after the match on Saturday or Wednesday.
Remember PJ O'Brien's in Auckland. PJ O'Brien's in Auckland. That was the best spot.
Anyway, free drink Absolutely. About free trade, free drink, absolutely.
Yeah.
At different times, in fairness, just different times, wasn't it? Because in fairness, the Kiwis used to drink after the matches as well, didn't they? Not an awful lot now, but they did a little bit. Anyway, when I went to Newcastle, okay, just because I know you want to stay on the theme, went to Newcastle. Unfortunately, I was the first Irish player to go professional. And I say unfortunately because if I held back by 3 or 4 months, I would have got a better contract. But anyway, that's irrelevant. I arrived over Newcastle, freezing cold, and from, doing we did a fair bit of training, like jokes apart. But suddenly I was training twice a day because that's all we did was train. So for the first 3 or 4 months, it was really, really severe. And I think when I went over to Newcastle, it was 2 years before we won the Premiership. So the goal then was to stay up in the second division, which we did. We had to win the last 3 matches. And then the next year, the goal was to be promoted. And we finished second, I think, to Richmond. And then the third year, we won the Premiership. Was that as good as beating the All Blacks? To me, probably not, because I played the All Blacks, I think, 10 or 11 times and won once. So beating the All Blacks to me was a huge feat. Saying that, I went over to Newcastle to get a taste of good club rugby. It was very good in Greystones at the time. But I just wanted to push myself because I knew, I was at the end of it. So.
You encountered Clive Woodward, Niall, when you were then in London. Did you get the sense already then that he was going to be such a successful coach that he became?
No, he was absolutely rubbish. So Clive is an amazing individual. He's an unbelievable motivator, a great talker, but technically as a rugby coach, he wouldn't have been very good at the time. I had come from Eddie O'Sullivan in Blackrock in the AIL days, who at that stage was way ahead of his time in terms of analysing teams and players and everything like that. So Clive used to send me letters. I was working in my dad's accountancy firm in 1996, and he'd sign off because the Euros 96, we should all remember, was in the UK in the summer of 96, and the song that came out was Football's Coming Home. So I think it was after the Five Nations, so it was sort of March, April, May. I had 3 or 4 letters, and he'd sign it off at Rugby's Coming Home. He was bizarre. The first game we played in 96, he wanted us to wear different numbers. He wanted us all to dye our hair green. But if you remember, the 2 boys who certainly remember him playing, he was an absolute sort of maverick on the pitch. He did some crazy stuff which was way ahead of his time. So I think the problem he had with the London Irish was he didn't have a good enough squad. He went to Bath for a while, and then he went to England. And obviously, they've quite deep pockets in the RFU. And he's quite, not necessarily a bully, but he'll get his way when he wants it. And it, allied to having a really good team in 2003, I think he went in there in 99, 2000. It just peaked. Their team in 2003 for that World Cup just peaked right at the right time. But when I had him, certainly he wasn't very good.
You retired, Niall. Your career was cut short by injury. What would your advice be now to players that you represent or that you're an agent for about what you do life after rugby in terms of how you develop a career, what you should be looking out for now, given your own experience?
The advice I gave when I started the Players Association as well was because when I finished, whilst I'd studied accountancy, I hadn't qualified because I'd left it to go and play pro over in England. So do something when you're playing rugby so you make the transition when you do finish that bit easier. So there's also now a lot more supports for players than there was for the likes of me and others who, at least I'd worked sort of for 3 years in my dad's office, so I had some sense of what was going on because I was paid an absolute pittance as a trainee accountant. So most guys have never worked like 4 or 5 years younger than me, so if they played pro. So it's really making connections, if they can do some work experience, do some study. And also over the years, it's shown guys who are sort of switched on and have an interest outside of pro rugby generally make that transition a bit smoother. The guys who don't do anything find it harder.
Just do it, Colin. Just marry a school teacher.
Laying hen. Don't
become an auctioneer anyway, I'll tell you that much.
We were speaking about the Lions there, Nick. Should the Lions happen this year or should they postpone it? Is it all about touring for you?
I don't know. It's funny. Somebody mentioned it to me today. They said, I hear they might be playing a Lions match in Croke Park, so I infer from that there might be one maybe in Twickenham, there might be one in Edinburgh, but you know, you'd like to, you know, it's such a huge experience all around. You know, if you don't have a full house to watch them, I don't think it'd be the same. I know the logistics are tough. You know, doesn't mean you'd have to just, you know, skip for 2 or 3 years, or, you know, maybe, I suppose you probably would have. Can you postpone it for 1 year? Probably not. I think do it right, full stop. I don't think half doing it now, I think it's just too important to kind of half do it.
Mick, would you have a similar view to that?
Yeah, look, and I suppose particularly from a playing point of view, you know, like when myself and Poppy went to New Zealand in '93, it was the last of the amateur tours, and we were there for 10 weeks. Like, it was just, looking back at it, it was just phenomenal, because it's not I suppose the Lions tour really is it's not just about the test matches, it's about the whole tour itself, and it's about, you know, going to places. Like when we were in New Zealand that time, we were in Hawke's Bay and places like that I'd never seen a Lions tour, and I think they beat us actually.
Thanks, Colin.
But
not us, you, not.
Oh, sorry, Pop. You were with the English back at that stage. You were with the English.
I was with my friends from the UK.
Yeah. You're yourself and the 7 other English forwards.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. Yeah. They had to pick one, as we said. Anyway, go on. You know, this is really interesting. Keep going.
But like, you know, you lived out of a suitcase like for 10 weeks, and you were in 2 different places every week, and it was, that to me was, because let's put it this way, I wasn't lucky enough like Poppy. I didn't make enough ass to get on the test side, but unfortunately I was in the midweek team, but I loved it, and I swear to God I look back at it with great pride. I suppose the older you get, it's like to say, the older you get, the better you are. But certainly, looking back on that, it was a great highlight just to go to all these places.
Yeah, of course. And jokes apart, Olive, I mean, Donal Lennon would say as well, you know, the advocate of it is a good Lions tour is a happy Lions team. I mean,
absolutely.
And there's basically very quickly, the issue with the Lions tour is it very quickly breaks into 2 teams, a Wednesday team and a Saturday team. And obviously, the Wednesday team playing a Wednesday, they train very hard, probably on after that. So if they're playing a Wednesday, train hard Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the Saturday team, you know, it's all pushed in. So you're not, you know, I suppose there's 2 teams as such, and you're trying to keep that synergy going. You're trying to keep, if the Wednesday team is happy, fantastic. If the Wednesday team is unhappy, if they feel that they're not getting a fair cut at having a chance of playing on a Saturday, you know, and I'm not going to pick names. And then we were in New Zealand.
Yeah.
You know, there was 4 or 5 players, and I can't mention the fact they were from Scotland, but they lost interest very, very quickly, which basically disrupted the whole thing, because they didn't give a company, you know.
Yeah, and the Welsh fellas were homesick as well, so that's really definitely didn't help. For some reason, myself and you, Poppy, we fitted in nicely.
We were just, you know, something.
Yeah. But it's true. Like, and you're right. I remember then, Poppy, there was only 30 players, like, you know what I mean? So a lot of fellas had to bench every week and play or whatever, you know? Like, back then, it was 2 players for every position. Now, you can have a Lions tour that could be 40 odd players in it. Like,
sure. I mean, you go on, we were going to say maybe touch about the famous thing. I was actually going to scratch down a few things. You know, you meet lads and, lads, you wouldn't make it today. The game today is so tough. And I'm looking there and I'm saying, right, here we go. Props today, 50 minutes max. Yeah. Then they go off, right? We had to play 80 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, the rest, you know, every 7 or 8 minutes, the TMO interrupts everything for 3 or 4 minutes, and they start going through who did what or who might have done that. And yes, that could
who got caught. Who got caught, Poppy? That's the thing.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, Colin, I mean, if somebody misbehaved, a quick slap.
Absolutely.
Sorted. And there wasn't any interruptions, you know. I remember the first time I played, I think, in England, and I remember, we were on our own line, sweating it out, scrum, it was our scrum, got the ball back. I got a merciful belt, kick for touch, and I remember, I was, and we'll talk about concussion later on, I'm not trying to belittle concussion, got to the line out. I think Clive Norning was running the line, and he said to me, Dean Richards. I said, oh, okay, thanks. No, so they were the days when the linesmen couldn't, they couldn't interrupt.
Are you sure?
Sure, he was
there again, you know, you got him back. You know, if you didn't get him back,
no.
I would have seen him running away. Anyway, have I lost the train of thought? Oh yeah, who else then?
But Poppy, it's interesting you talk about there. You talk about and we mentioned it earlier. Back in the day, we'd play a match on a Saturday, and a tough match. And as you said, we'd have the few pints after. We'd go up for the meeting. We'd have the meal. We'd go out that night. And then at 8:30 the following morning, a full scrummaging session. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that was so much for recovery and so much for...
No, I mean, exactly. I remember doing a set of scrums, and you mentioned Riggers before. Riggers, the back row behind me. Jesus, when I think of it. I think we played a match against Galwegians. Had a rake of pints, in fairness. Riggers drove back, and they were the days when there were very few cars, and probably no cars on the road at that time of the day, because I think we probably had to leave around 5 o'clock in the morning. Scrummaging was there, and he always brought in a crowd. You see, youngsters came in who really fancied their chances, so this was their chance really to make a thing. And I can just remember one of them said, "Jesus, lads, the smell of drink." And Riggers was behind me, and I was so low on the scrum. I was looking at the grass, and I don't say I was getting vertigo, but I could just see the grass moving around me. Absolutely. But then again, you did an hour and a half of scrummaging. You know what I mean?
That's the thing.
And you look at the games now. You could look at a game now. There could be 8 scrums.
Yeah.
We could have had 30 or 40 bloody scrums.
It's a completely different world, lads. It just sounds like a completely different world. Are you worried at all, Nick, about with the concussion, the very serious situation with Steve Thompson and that news that came out? Have you been worried at all about any health issues yourself, given when you play the game, or was the game at an amateur level a lot more different?
Well, I remember being asked on the radio when I was playing. Steroids was a very hot topic, and God, who was there?
I was convinced you were on them, Poppy.
There you go. Well, I was asked a question by some fancy blonde anyway. We need to touch on the issue on steroids, and I said to her, well, the nearest I ever got to steroids was hemorrhoids, and there was just a blank silence. She didn't know where to. Sorry, enough of that.
Yeah, all right, Nick. Rein it in, please.
Sorry.
No, but it's a serious issue, concussion in the game. Have you at all been ever worried about, like, your health in later life, given the hits you would have got as a player?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I've had a lot of concussions. Like, there's a great saying out there, like, I got concussed, but I can't remember it. You know what I mean? And that's, like, I remember the scary thing about concussion is sometimes you could get concussed in a game and you'd be fine. And then you get to the dressing room after, and it's like you're waking up from a dream. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you said, oh my God, what's happening? You know what I mean? That was a scary thing. And then you go out to the car park and you can't find your car. You know what I mean? So listen, we've all been there, and particularly Poppy. I'm sure you've had issues like that.
Well, I remember playing Australia in the World Cup, and I remember we had this. This is one moment we nearly did this, and we nearly beat them. In fairness, until the backs. Remember that Rob Saunders made a poxy kick, and it was intercepted.
That was on TV. That was on TV last night. I was watching it, by the way.
Well, somebody sent me a video. They sent me a screenshot of me doing nothing, and anyway, they just said, "Oh, the statue is you." Anyway, I think the game plan on that was one game plan.
Kick the ball up there.
That was first time. I think we had the kickoff, so don't worry about where the ball was. Get there and hit the nearest Australian that's close to you. So of course, there we go. I think Franna was supposed to go at Willie O, but he didn't. So I ended up against Willie O. So I said, for God's sake. So I hit this chap anyway, probably broke me knuckle. He turned around and bang. And I said, all I can say was, I can't remember any of the game, which is horrific. But I had a fantastic game when I look back.
I don't know what version of it you were watching, Poppy. I was watching last night. And I tell you one thing, all Ireland did. And I the way you hear about matches, and And, they say, Ireland were so good in 91, we should have beaten Australia.
I know.
All we did was kick the ball up in the air, right? And back then, right, the whole idea about kicking the ball up in the air was to cause mayhem. And you actually hoped the fullback would catch it, right? That was your aim. You didn't want him to knock it on. You didn't want him to fumble it. You wanted him to catch it. And then the Indians come in and charge over him that was the game plan.
True. Yeah, no, in fairness, that's the script. But, you can say, concussion was policed. Am I wrong? Because I remember Fergus Dunlea, who was Lansdowne, Leinster,
That's
Ireland.
right, yeah. He got a right.
And he got 3 concussions one year, and he gave up playing. Full stop.
And in fairness, you remember Mick Galwey, who was the Irish doctor at the time, you know what I mean? And do you remember Poppy, on a Sunday morning, we'd be all racing to Mick Galwey and say, I've got a knock on the head yesterday. You know what I mean? And you probably did. But there was always 2 or 3 fellas that be left out of training. But the whole idea was to get Mick Galwey first, and then we'd be left out. But honestly, there was often days that you would get a bad knock.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. If it was now, there'd be the HIA return to play protocols. Back then, it was just get back onto the pitch.
Niall, the players
know the calls.
Yeah, Niall, the players you represent. I mean, how do they feel about the current issue and the revelations in recent months about early onset dementia and concussion?
I think it's like anything. When you're in it, you don't think about it a huge amount. Also, what Poppy and Galwey were talking about is alien to the modern guys. It's nearly alien to me because I was on the wing. I only got concussed once. It was mid-90s. I actually saw Lawrence Delalio sort of exposed at the side of a ruck and his ribs, and I went in from the wing. But I got so excited that I was going to hit someone, which I rarely did. I actually tripped and hit my head off his hip and knocked myself out. So I generally didn't get any concussions, but you still got hit around the place, missing tackles mainly. So today, they literally, sometimes they get, it's nearly overboard, which I agree with, so that therefore the safety is better. But any sort of knock, they're gone. They're off the pitch. Even if it's not seen, there's guys in the stand watching, members of the management team, and there's an independent medic there. So it's a lot safer now, and they don't come back and play.
And I saw
early enough,
game, and they were had some widget on their necks, some kind of an implant which apparently monitors concussion.
Yeah, it's in the GPS thing. It measures the impacts and stuff. So the sort of science and the medicine behind it now is so much better. The real risk is probably for the likes of us who played amateur and into pro, particularly Poppy was talking about it earlier, where when he went pro in Newcastle and he trained twice a day. I can remember the first tour, we went to New Zealand in 97. It was an Ireland development tour, it was called, the year of the Lions tour. The rest basically went to New Zealand for 5 or 6 weeks. And the manager didn't know what to do with us because they'd never been on a tour like that before where they could train you full time. So we were 2-3 sessions a day. And then you go out and get absolutely walloped by a team in New Zealand. So there are the concerns where guys got knocked out and you just got up and played. Like I can remember some guys being knocked out twice in a game and we didn't know any better. And nor did the medics at the time. So they're probably the concern. So when you see someone like Steve Thompson, it's definitely a concern. But I have 3 kids. The eldest boy's 13. He wants to be a pro rugby player.
What do you say to him now? Do you encourage it?
Yeah, he plays Gaelic football as well and he plays soccer. So I'm letting him do all 3. Until someone tells me there's a 100% link to whatever, whether it's dementia or other things, I still think it's a great game. Like my father had dementia, he passed away last year. My mum has dementia, so there's a high chance, I'm 1 in 4, that I'll actually have dementia, and that's irrespective of me playing rugby or not. So I'm sort of fairly qualified, I would think, to talk about it.
Yeah.
I have kids going into the game, and obviously I've seen what happens to them in dementia cases. So I also would have seen, I played with a guy, Jared Cunningham, in late 90s or early 2000s, a Kiwi who got motor neurons at 33. So unfortunately, there is people in rugby, in soccer, and don't play sports who get these diseases. And it's horrendous. They're probably the two worst, in my opinion.
I don't want to be flippant about it, but I mean, heavens forbid, there's always, people are going to get dementia, and again, we're not qualified, I suppose, to talk about it, but, I do know people who are I know somebody early 50s who has dementia, and she wouldn't have played sport ever. Now, again, it's very easy to pick one-off cases, but I think. And then, kind of say, well, why doesn't everyone wear scrum caps? And then people say, well, because American footballers wear bloody helmets, and they've a huge instance of, I think, neck injuries and stuff, so, which there's an inference there, may lead to dementia,
Just in terms of where we're looking at this year, and as you said correctly, Niall, the game has completely changed. We hear, like Nick and Galwey's stories about the amateur days and how much fun it was. Ireland going into the Six Nations, just Mick, on Paul O'Connell, as a forwards coach and psychologically, what's he going to add to the equation with Andy Farrell, do you think, Mick?
I think he's going to bring something, maybe that what Ireland have been lacking in, or particularly in the last season. Paul O'Connell, by his nature, is he demands a lot of himself. He certainly will demand a lot of the players around him. I think he'll bring that hard edge into them. He'll bring that bit of fire into them, and you can say what you want. Sometimes that's very important, even in the modern game. You need to have the bit of bejesus about you, and certainly Paul will bring that, along with a great skill set that he has. I remember, when he came onto the Munster team first, and I played with him when he got his first cap for Ireland. He just brought a new dimension to everything as a player, and I know he's done that, for Munster, Ireland, and indeed the Lions. And what he's going to bring to this pack I think is going to be very useful to this Irish team, because you've a lot of good young players. They know the game inside out, but no matter what you say, Paul will bring something to that dressing room, to that pitch, to that warm-up, to that pre-match or whatever that these players haven't seen before. And I certainly think it'll be a huge benefit to the squad.
I think technically as well, Golov will bring so much, because he's so obsessive about line-out, and that's what he's been brought in for. And if you look back over the last couple of years, even before Rory Best retired, the line-out wasn't really functioning. You sort of take Dev Toner out of the line-out, and it's a different kettle of fish altogether. So I think he'll, particularly with the younger guys who are coming through, who aren't as experienced line-out callers, Paulie's expertise in that area is probably going to help relieve the pressure on Andy Farrell, probably, of a line-out not functioning.
And you know what? He'll be great for James Ryan. Like, we saw James Ryan captaining Ireland there recently, and to be honest, it kind of, you could see that he wasn't playing to the best of his own ability. And Paul will teach him those skills. You can still play, you can still be a captain, you can still do all the calls, and it won't affect your own game. And that's a skill set in itself. And Paul will certainly help players like that.
We got some text in here. 53106. My first away game ever, Colombier, Munster 1999. Munster won 31-15. Mick was like a raging bull. Them were the days. A few points with the squad on the way home. Great show, Real Rugby Men. That is from Pete. And Niall, are you like a father with children when it comes to Gary Ringrose and Andrew Conway when they're doing so well, given you represent them?
Yeah, I don't watch the match like an ex-player or a fan, really. When I've clients playing, I'm generally watching that they don't get injured.
Right.
Or badly injured. So there's different times where you can enjoy it, but a lot of the time you're just sort of watching for your guys. So it's a bit sort of weird, but generally my eldest fella, Oliver, will watch with it. So he's a bit of a stato already. He's probably a sort of Paul O'Connell in the making, albeit he won't be in the second row. So yeah, it's funny. You build up a rapport the longer you'll have a relationship. So I'm doing this 10 years now. So Geordie Murphy up in Ulster was my first client. So I'm not saying I'm best friends with him, but I'd have probably the best relationship because I have the longest relationship with him. So you'd probably talk more with someone who you've worked with longer, like in any walk of life. But it's definitely enjoyable, although I did think pre-Christmas was probably too much rugby on the TV. With all the internationals and all the Pro 14 and Europe and everything. So in a way, it's not bad having 2 weeks off.
And now when you're representing players and you're doing, maybe possibly contracts and that kind of thing, Can you understand the RFU's position around players that are playing overseas for French or English clubs, and it could be more attractive now post-COVID, that don't get the opportunity to play for Ireland, Simon Zebo being one example?
No, for me, I think they should just say, if you go away, you're probably not going to play. The likelihood is you're not going to play, but I don't think they should rule it out. Certainly, if you look at Zebo, he was playing very well for Racing, and we were struggling for a 15 since Rob Kearney's retired. So I don't think we have enough players to put it in place. New Zealand can do it, England can do it, but the likes of Scotland, they don't win as many games as we do, but the ones they do, they wouldn't win them without the likes of a Stuart Hogg, Johnny Gray, who are both down in Exeter. So I think, in a way, you could say it saves the RFU money if a few of them go away. The old argument was they lose control of the player and the welfare, which still exists, but certainly if they go and play in England, they don't play as many games as they used to, and it wasn't like when we went and played where they flogged the players. There's an element of that still in France. There's probably too many games, but as Poppy said at the start of the show, some of the players these days probably don't play enough. So I think we may be slightly overprotective of some players, whereas outside of Ireland, there's probably the other way, maybe 3 or 4 games too much when you go outside of Ireland, and maybe 3 or 4 games too little in Ireland for the top guys.
And Nick, how do you think we're equipped for the Six Nations at the moment?
I think we'll be okay. You know what I mean?
No, Nick.
Thanks, Gareth. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I'm still here,
no,
boys. Yeah. I think at the moment there's no doubt to generalise it. We're rebuilding at the moment, and I think we have to just sit back a little bit and we're going to have. There's no doubt. We're on the way up. We're going to have a couple of steps back before we starting having 3 or 4 steps forward. And I think as a general public, look at all the great names now who really they've retired or really they're getting very close. They might have another year left. I think there's probably an argument. Should some of the senior players maybe bow out now and just let's get these other players blooded. Saying that it's to keep a team structured. It's hard if you make it too big of a clean out. And the other thing too is I suppose you have coaches there that are probably tied into, I presume you're tied into win bonuses, or your contract will be renewed in 2 or 3 years' time if you have a 70% win ratio. So I think you have a few things that kind of play against each other. But I'm looking at the front row, and I can see some very good young players coming through. But I suppose I'd like to see them getting more game time somehow. I don't know whether you can put more A matches on. Obviously, we're restricted at the moment. But I think the amount of game time they're getting, I don't think they're going to get a fair enough chance to, to progress a little bit quicker.
Mick, we will get you the final word on this. How are we going to do in Six Nations, you think?
Look, I think we'll be okay. You know what I mean? There probably won't be any crowds, which, we don't really depend on that. You know what I mean? Like, what I like about this Irish team and indeed Irish teams over the last decade is it doesn't matter where we go and play anymore. Our form is good. But certainly, we need a bit of luck along the way. We see that, like, Munster are back playing well. Leinster have always done well. Connacht are there thereabouts. And Ulster have had a good season. So, you look at your top players, and particularly your key players and your decision makers, they're playing well. I'd worry a bit about Johnny Sexton. You know what I mean? He's still our captain. He's still the main man. But he just seems to be picking up niggly injuries that he wasn't maybe a number of years ago, and it'll depend on that. It's good to see Conor Murray back playing well, and I certainly think that if we can pick from a full squad, we have a good chance. But what we'll need to do is, when we come up against the likes of England are building a reputation now that they're bullying teams, and that they know sometimes they feel that they're better than you when you go onto the pitch, and Ireland are going to have to go back to believing that they're equally, if not better than England. England is the key. Wales are not the team they were. France, of course, are the up-and-coming team. So England and France are the teams to beat, but I certainly think that we have the equipment and the players.
And in fairness, Golov, with the implementing or the bringing in of Paul into the setup, that will definitely put an edge. Because in fairness, certainly youngsters, it's very easy to face up against these teams and kind of stand back. Whereas lads, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, at the end of the day, you get cut into those players. You look at the club matches that they're playing over there, you get them up front and they're a different side. Look at what France gives them,
Okay, Nick Popplewell, Mick Galwey, Niall Woods, you've been great sports for joining us on the Saturday panel over the last hour to speak about the amateur era. Seemed like an absolute riot, and also some issues pertinent to the current game of rugby. Thanks so much this afternoon, guys.
Cheers. Thanks, God bless.
Okay, back after this on Off the Ball Saturday.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball.
Do you really need to own your own van? That precious working capital could be invested in your business. Volkswagen Commercial Vehicle Leasing offers another way. Lease the all